The bell above the door jingled softly as Ethan wiped down the counter for what felt like the 100th time that morning. The scent of freshly ground coffee beans filled the air, mixing with the faint aroma of warm pastries cooling on the rack. His cafe, the Roasted Leaf, was modest but cozy, tucked away on a quiet corner of the city where most people hurried past without noticing. Yet for Ethan, this place was more than a business. It was his lifeline. A year ago, his life had been a mess. He had left behind not just a corporate job that drained him, but also the person he once believed was his forever. That breakup had cut deeper than he thought possible, leaving him hollow, restless, searching for something to fill the silence. So he poured everything he had left into this cafe, his savings, his sleepless nights, his fragile hope. The walls were painted a warm shade of cream, with wooden shelves lined with potted plants and books for anyone to borrow. Soft jazz hummed from the speakers, and sunlight streamed in through large windows, bathing the room in golden warmth. Customers often told him the cafe felt like home, and though he always smiled at the compliment, he knew he built it that way because he himself had been searching for home. Every morning, he opened at 7 a.m. sharp. Regulars trickled in like clockwork. The elderly man who ordered the same black coffee every day, the college student with earbuds who camped at the corner table, the young mother balancing her latte in one hand and stroller in the other. Ethan had grown fond of them all, but his smile was always professional, never too personal. He kept his walls up, even behind the warmth of his cafe. 'Cause every so often, when he least expected it, his mind drifted back to her. Isabella. Her laugh that could cut through any bad day, the way she always ordered caramel cappuccino with extra foam, how she scribbled notes on napkins when inspiration struck. They had planned a life together once. But life had a cruel way of changing plans, and they had walked away from each other, both wounded, both too proud to turn back. Ethan shook his head, forcing the memory away as he arranged mugs on the shelf. He didn't allow himself to dwell on the past. Not anymore. His cafe was about moving forward, not looking back. At least that was what he told himself. The morning rush began, and Ethan lost himself in the rhythm of steaming milk, grinding beans, and scribbling names on cups. By noon, the pace slowed, and he found himself sitting by the window with his own cup of black coffee, staring absently at the people passing outside. The world felt distant sometimes, as though he existed on the other side of the glass. Then, the bell above the door jingled again. Ethan stood, ready to greet another customer, but when he looked up, his heart stopped. There she was. Isabella. Her hair was a little shorter now, her style a little more refined, but her presence hit him like a wave. She paused at the threshold, her eyes scanning the cafe before landing on him. For a heartbeat, the world went silent. No jazz, no footsteps, no clinking dishes. Just two pairs of eyes, locking across the years that had kept them apart. Ethan's hand tightened around his coffee cup, and though his mind screamed 1,000 questions, only one thought managed to surface. Fate had brought her back. And she was standing in his cafe. Ethan's pulse thundered in his ears as Isabella stepped further inside, the bell above the door chiming softly behind her. She glanced around the cafe, her eyes lingering on the bookshelves, the plants, the warm glow of the hanging lights. For a moment, she didn't seem to notice him, almost as if she was just another customer taking in the atmosphere. But then her gaze returned, steady and deliberate. "Ethan," she said finally, her voice carrying a blend of surprise and something unspoken, hesitation perhaps, or nostalgia. Hearing his name on her lips after all these years sent a shiver down his spine. He straightened, forcing a smile that felt tighter than it should. "Isabella." Her lips curved into the faintest smile, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. She approached the counter slowly, like someone navigating a fragile bridge. Ethan, trying to steady his nerves, wiped his hands on a rag that was already clean. So she glanced at the chalkboard menu above him, then back at his face. "You own this place?" He nodded, clearing his throat. "Yeah. Then did a little over a year ago. It's mine." There was pride in his words, though he didn't mean for it to sound boastful. Isabella's gaze softened as she looked around again. It's beautiful. Cozy. Very you. Comment landed heavier than she probably intended. Ethan busied himself with straightening a stack of napkins, though his hands didn't really need to. Thanks. What can I get you? She tilted her head, and for a moment her old playful smirk returned. Still the professional, huh? Can't even ask how I've been before shoving a coffee menu at me? Teasing was gentle, but it cut straight to his chest. He chuckled lightly, though it sounded more nervous than amused. Old habits, I guess. How have you been? Isabella hesitated before answering. She looked down at her hands, clasping them together. Life's been complicated. Different. But I'm here now. Something in her tone suggested more than her words revealed, but Ethan didn't push. Instead, he nodded toward the menu. Still a caramel cappuccino with extra foam? Her eyes flickered with surprise. You remember. Some things stick, he replied quietly. As he prepared her drink, the silence between them felt charged, neither cold nor warm but filled with memories neither dared to touch. The hiss of the milk steamer was the only sound as Ethan tried to calm his racing heart. When he finally placed the cup in front of her, their fingers brushed, and the brief contact sent a current through him. She held the cup carefully, as if it carried more weight than just coffee. You've changed, she said softly, studying his face. But not really. He met her gaze. You too. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other, the noise of the cafe fading into the background. It was as if time folded in on itself, bringing them back to late nights and laughter, to whispered promises and dreams they once shared. Then Isabella broke the moment with a small sip, closing her eyes briefly as if savoring more than just the flavor. When she opened them, there was a glimmer of something Ethan hadn't seen in years, something fragile but real. This is still the best cappuccino I've ever had, she said, her voice lighter now. He smiled genuinely this time. Good to know I haven't lost my touch. A comfortable silence settled, but Ethan knew it wouldn't last. Questions buzzed in his mind. Why she was here, what had brought her back, what she wanted from this encounter. Yet he stayed quiet, sensing that the answers would come in their own time. Isabella glanced around, then back at him. Do you mind if I stay for a while? Just sit. His chest tightened, but he nodded. Of course. Make yourself at home. She chose a table near the window, the same one she used to favor all those years ago. Watching her settle in, sipping her cappuccino, Ethan felt the fragile beginnings of something stirring. Hope, fear, longing, all tangled together. For the first time in years, the cafe didn't feel like just his sanctuary. It felt like it had been waiting for this moment for her. And as the sunlight poured in through the window, Ethan realized something he hadn't dared to admit until now. Fate had given him a second chance. The days that followed blurred into something Ethan couldn't quite define. Isabella didn't just disappear after that first cup of cappuccino. She came back. The next morning, then 2 days later, then again the following week. Always at different times, always with the same quiet smile. Sometimes she'd sit by the window with her laptop open, pretending to work while her gaze lingered on the counter. Other times she'd strike up small conversations with Ethan, nothing too personal at first, books, music, the cafe itself. But beneath those casual exchanges ran an undercurrent of history neither could ignore. The regular customers began to notice. One older gentleman, Mr. Clark, leaned over the counter one afternoon and whispered with a knowing grin, "That one looks like she belongs here, son." Ethan just smiled awkwardly, unwilling to confirm or deny what his heart already screamed. Isabella, meanwhile, seemed at ease in the cafe, as though it had always been a part of her life. She laughed softly at the barista's jokes, complimented the playlist Ethan spent hours curating, and occasionally brought in pastries she claimed were better than anything here, though she always admitted they weren't. Each visit unraveled another thread of the wall Ethan had built around his heart. One evening, just before closing, Ethan found Isabella still sitting at her table, lost in thought. Café was quiet, bathed in the golden hue of the hanging lights. He walked over, hesitant but drawn to her presence. "You've been here a lot lately," he said gently. She looked up, blinking as if pulled from another world. "Am I bothering you?" "Not at all," he replied quickly. Too quickly. "I just didn't expect you." Her lips curved into a faint smile. "Neither did I." Ethan sat across from her, something he hadn't dared do until now. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then, Isabella broke the silence. "Do you ever think about back then?" she asked, her voice quiet but steady. His chest tightened. He could lie, pretend that he'd moved on completely, but her gaze demanded honesty. "Every day," he admitted. She exhaled softly, as if she'd been holding her breath. "Me too." The admission hung between them, fragile and heavy all at once. Ethan searched her eyes for regret, for blame, but found only a reflection of his own longing. "I used to imagine running into you," Isabella continued, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup. "Wondering what I'd say, if I'd even have the courage to speak. And now here we are." "Here we are," Ethan echoed, his voice thick with emotion. The moment stretched, and for the first time in years, Ethan allowed himself to truly look at her, the way her hair framed her face, the way her eyes softened when she smiled. She wasn't the same girl he once knew, but she wasn't a stranger either. She was something new, something familiar and foreign all at once. Before he could stop himself, he asked, "Why now? Why come back after all this time?" Isabella hesitated, her expression shifting. "Because I realized something," she said finally. "Life doesn't give endless chances. Sometimes you have to take the one that scares you the most." Her words lodged deep in his chest, stirring hope and fear in equal measure. He wanted to ask what she meant, what this chance was, and if it included him, but before he could, she smiled, almost shyly. "Besides," she added, "I missed your cappuccinos." Ethan laughed, the tension breaking just enough for them both to breathe. Yet beneath the humor, the truth lingered. Something had reignited between them. A spark small but undeniable. As he walked her to the door that night, Isabella paused, her hand resting briefly on his arm. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" he asked. "For not pushing me away." And then she was gone, leaving Ethan standing in the quiet cafe, his heart racing with the promise of something he wasn't sure he deserved but desperately wanted. For the first time in years, he closed the cafe not with a sense of loneliness, but with the echo of laughter and the flicker of hope. The Second Chance Cafe had lived up to its name, and Ethan wondered if it had only just begun. The rhythm of their new connection unfolded slowly, like the cautious turning of pages in a book long left unopened. Isabella kept returning to the cafe, sometimes every day, sometimes after a week. With each visit, her conversations with Ethan grew a little longer, a little deeper. They shared stories of the years in between. His struggles building the cafe from nothing, her work as a designer that had taken her to different cities, even countries. First, their talks skirted around the past, hovering in the present, but the weight of their history never truly left the room. One rainy afternoon, the storm outside mirrored the turmoil that had begun to stir between them. Café was quieter than usual, just a few scattered customers. Isabella sat at her usual table, sketching idly in a notebook, while Ethan wiped down the counter, stealing glances at her. He thought he saw a different heaviness in her that day, something unspoken pressing at her lips. Finally, she closed her notebook and called softly, "Ethan, can we talk?" The way she said it froze him. Not playful, not casual, serious. He nodded, walking over, and she gestured for him to sit. "Do you remember," she began carefully, "why we ended?" He felt the air shift. His chest tightened. He had thought about that moment countless times, but hearing her ask it aloud made the old wound sting fresh. "Yes," he said. His voice was rougher than he intended. "I remember." They had been young, overwhelmed by ambition and distance. Ethan had been too consumed with his dream of opening a cafe, working long hours, shutting her out without meaning to. Isabella had been offered a job in another city, and instead of asking him to fight for her, she had walked away, assuming his silence meant indifference. Neither had said the words they truly needed to. "I left," she whispered now, her fingers gripping the edge of the table. "And I told myself you didn't care enough to stop me." Ethan looked down, shame flooding him. "And I told myself you didn't care enough to stay." The silence that followed was deafening. Outside, thunder cracked and rain beat harder against the windows. "You hurt me, Ethan," Isabella said, her voice trembling but steady. "You shut me out when I needed you most." "And she faltered, her eyes shimmering. "I wasn't brave enough to tell you what I really wanted." Ethan swallowed hard, guilt gnawing at him. "I thought chasing my dream was the only way to prove I was worthy of you. But I should have realized that you needed me more than you needed my success." Her eyes softened, but the hurt still lingered. "Do you think we can really start over? Or are we just chasing ghosts?" Question cut deep. Ethan wanted to say yes, wanted to promise that this time would be different. But promises were fragile things. He leaned forward, his hands trembling as he reached for hers. She didn't pull away, but her fingers stayed stiff beneath his touch. "I don't know what the future holds," he admitted honestly. "But I know one thing, I never stopped loving you. Not once, not for a single day." Tears slipped down her cheeks then, silent and unguarded. She pressed her free hand against her lips, as if trying to hold herself together. "I wanted to hear that 10 years ago," she whispered. "And part of me is terrified it's too late now." Café felt unbearably small, every sound amplified by the storm outside. Ethan's heart ached, caught between the hope of what could be and the shadow of what had been. Isabella pulled her hands back gently, standing as though she needed to escape the weight of the moment. "I should go," she said, her voice breaking. Panic surged through him. He wanted to stop her, to beg her to stay, but he remembered the boy he'd once been, the one who tried to hold her with silence instead of words. He couldn't make the same mistake again. "Isabella," he said quickly, his voice raw, "please, don't walk away this time. Not without giving me the chance to prove that I've learned, that I can be better. That I can love you the way you deserve." She froze at the door, her back to him, her hand trembling on the handle. Slowly she turned, her eyes brimming with conflict. "Then show me, Ethan. Don't just say it. Show me." And with that, she slipped into the storm, leaving Ethan standing in the glow of his cafe lights, shaken but determined. That night, as the rain poured and the cafe stood empty, Ethan realized something. This wasn't just about second chances. It was about redemption. About proving that love could survive not just in spite of the past, but because of it. He would not let this be another unfinished story. The rain had stopped by morning, leaving the streets washed clean, the air carrying the earthy scent of renewal. Ethan hadn't slept much that night. Instead, he sat at one of the corner tables in his own cafe, a notebook open before him. The words wouldn't come easily, but he knew he needed them, not for himself, but for Isabella. He filled page after page with memories. Their first date under flickering streetlights, the way she used to laugh until her shoulders shook, the night they had dreamed of the future together. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to write not just about the past, but about what he wanted for tomorrow. By the time the morning rush began, he had an idea, something bold, something he had never done before. That afternoon, he closed the cafe early. A handwritten sign on the door read, "Closed for a private evening." Then he set to work. Candles were placed on every table, soft fairy lights draped along the windows, and the scent of fresh coffee and vanilla filled the air. The center table, he laid out a single rose and the notebook he had filled the night before. As the sun dipped low, he paced the cafe, rehearsing what he would say, though he knew words alone wouldn't be enough. He just hoped she would come. When the door finally opened, his heart stopped. Isabella stood there, her hair damp from the misty evening, her expression cautious but curious. "You closed the cafe for this?" she asked softly. "For us," Ethan corrected, his voice steady despite the storm inside him. "Come in." She hesitated, then stepped inside, her eyes darting to the candles, the lights, the notebook on the table. She looked both touched and uncertain. "What is this, Ethan?" He took a breath, walking toward her. "This is me finally saying the things I should have said years ago. No silence, no pride. Just honesty." He guided her to the table, handing her the notebook. She flipped through it slowly, her eyes scanning the words he had written. Memories, confessions, promises. Halfway through, her lips trembled and she set it down, tears shimmering in her eyes. "You kept all of this inside for so long," she whispered. "Too long," he admitted. "I thought I had to prove myself with bricks and coffee machines, with long hours and sacrifice. But what I should have proven is that I could choose you every single day. That's what I want now. To choose you again and again for as long as you'll let me." Her hand shook as she reached up to brush away her tears. For a long moment, she said nothing. The silence stretched, heavy with everything unsaid. Then, slowly, she smiled, a soft, trembling smile that made his chest ache. "You've changed," she murmured. "But the way you look at me, that hasn't." Ethan stepped closer, gently taking her hand. "Neither has the way I love you." She exhaled a shaky laugh, then leaned into him, her forehead resting against his chest. His arms wrapped around her instinctively, like they had always belonged there. For the first time in a decade, the world felt right again. "All right," she said softly, lifting her gaze to meet his. "Show me." "Every day. No more running, no more silence." "Never again," he vowed. Their lips met then, tender at first, then deeper, as though sealing the promise of a new beginning. Around them, the cafe glowed warm and golden, no longer just Ethan's dream, but theirs. Later that night, as they sat together in the candlelight, laughing over shared memories and imagining the future, Isabella traced her fingers over the worn wooden table and whispered, "Maybe this place isn't just your second chance, Ethan. Maybe it's ours." And for the first time in years, he believed it with all his heart.